Welcome back to my podcast, Grief the Real Talk. Today I'm sharing my thoughts about some of the things a griever experiences. Undoubtedly, everyone has lost a loved one, or ultimately will, so my thoughts here may become beneficial to others somewhere down the road. This is why I began this podcast. Not 5 minutes of any day since the day my husband left me here goes by that I'm not thinking of him or speaking to him. That man has woven into my soul, and not thinking of him would be like forgetting half of my body or forgetting to put on clothes. I share my thoughts and experiences here not just because I need a place to vent, but hoping, by sharing my realizations, help spread awareness not only to those that grieve, but for those who hold compassion for a griever in their own life, to hear what it's like from this side of grief. This discussion might seem a little dark, but grief isn't a sunny topic. I'd also like to state that this podcast isn't me crying out for help, but more for recognition for the so many in this sometimes dark world who can't summon their own voice. Yes, I am one of grief's victims, and I have been working diligently with books, videos, spirit, and meditations since I lost my husband, so that I can try and learn how to dig my own self out of the darkness that reigns. Because if I want to survive and find life again, I must find the lifeboat back to the light. It's a difficult thing to do oneself, but I have spent my whole life since childhood finding a way to get through adversity. I share my struggle on this journey, and I am not ashamed to admit it. But there are so many out there who may not be able to search for or find their strength to want to go on, no matter what their traumatic issue is. I'm a strong woman. I built myself up that way throughout my life. I'm strong-willed and strong-minded, but I will tell you honestly, this grieving business is a Goliath of a beast. I know what it has taken from me and can tell you it's not difficult to see how the weaker sometimes cannot pull through. So I felt that besides letting off a little personal steam, I wanted to spread the awareness to others by speaking up for those who may have family or friends going through some tough times who choose not to speak about their pain, so they may clue in. What sparked this episode came from my scanning through a book of material I'd written in draft to eventually put into a book on grief. I'm suddenly getting inspired to read through just some of the material I've written as I witnessed my husband's health decline to after his passing. At the moment, my writing is sitting in a file temporarily titled Conversations and Observations and Obituary. I currently have oodles of permanent titles on a page listed that I will have to work with once the book is put together and I find the most fitting title. From this side of grief, I see I am a strong woman who has lived through some terrible shit in my life, but nothing, and I mean nothing, is as painful as the grief I carry with me daily from the loss of my beloved husband. It doesn't matter that I could almost lift park benches from the strength I've acquired through difficulties in life. This enormous stranglehold that suffocates daily is an opponent bigger than life, and many days it can be emotionally crippling. I often go to the dark side since losing my other half, and no, time doesn't seem to ease. When the grief monster and the bubble of sadness that come along for the ride appear, I find myself in yet another duel. These duels become more and more trying, and they don't dissipate with time, despite everyone else in our circles forgetting we are in this grief for life. And it can take a long time, or forever, to climb back into joyful living. Our grief never leaves, even with however much time it may take for it to come to a slow simmer that resides within, without constantly bubbling over. Mine never seems to leave. I am only still learning how to temporarily suppress it. So we are forced to find a way to continue on with our lives or merely just exist. I am choosing life, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and that it some days doesn't knock the actual wind out of my breathing sails. The loneliness is overwhelming. I am naturally a tactile social being, often dubbed a social butterfly. Nobody is physically here for me, and I'm not one to cry for help to burden others. But I can't help but wonder, where are the people who used to be in my life? Why did my family forget me after such a traumatic event that goes on daily? There, I said it, and I'm going to have to leave that one alone for now, because honestly, the people I'm related to by blood give me enough fodder to write a book. Make that a tome. Some days I'm living on the precipice between living and existing. I am me, myself, and I. I was never that person who got depressed. But I can surely say I know what so many in this world struggle with, as this visiting sadness that looms large over me has given me new understanding. I don't want to call my sadness depression, maybe more like PTSD. My mind too often drifts in a continuous cycle of visionary reminders of watching my husband die daily before my eyes. This is some tough shit to erase from the playlist of home videos. It's a repetitive cycle that is easily triggered by a memory, a random object in my home, or just plain looking at photos of my husband, which surround my home like a mausoleum because I need them to be all around me. I've thankfully never been a depressed person, despite some of the awful things that have happened in my life. And knowing depression does exist on my maternal side, I am grateful I didn't inherit that dis-ease. I may get temporarily depressed, knowing that's the wrong word I sometimes substitute for sadness. But I don't allow myself to live in darkness, and I fight back with all my might not to allow myself to let a sad day turn into many in a row. Perhaps I'm lucky that way, but there are plenty of people who live in deep depression and can manage to keep that under a cloak when around others. This can lead to dangerous outcomes. I'm not that person who calls people to wow my troubles and moan. Instead, I'm silent and solitary. My cries for help will come in subtle ways, maybe talking to a friend and almost begging them to come visit, invading that fine line with my silent cry for help so as not to sound desperate, when in fact there are days when I am. People are busy. We don't wish to act sucky so we can stuff down our silent hell when we are all craving is some human connection, a hug, an ear for us to cast off our fears that sometimes keep us in the dark and have us questioning ourselves on why are we still here. Why am I here where nobody has time when I could be with one who my heart aches for? Often it's the crushing, suffocating pain of having to tolerate our own existence that leads to the many suicides labeled as mental health issues. Funny how I see in my own life how nobody has the time for a cry for help, even when it's deafeningly silent. But they always seem to make time for the darned funerals. Depression, like grief, is a silent thief that traps us at its will. It comes like a tornado sweeping over us, leaving us nothing to grab hold of in its wake. It can often be called a silent killer. Us grievers, the sad, lonely, or depressed, don't typically cry for help. And for the some that do, they aren't always heard. This is why so often these people commit suicide. They don't feel they are being heard, loved, or cared about. They're misunderstood for craving attention when in fact they are. And sometimes that attention they didn't receive could have been the very lifeline that have saved them. Connection and companionship are a crucial need for a griever, especially one who lives alone. Those who don't understand how depression can take hold of someone in their darkest moments should pay more attention to the signs without judgment. We watch movies and newsreels about people who feel there's no help for them and choose to end their pain all too often. And their loved ones sit in question, asking themselves, why didn't I see the signs? Because you don't always see the signs, as many depressed are clever at masquerading their pain with smiles and jokes and with their pretended happiness. But if you listen and learn not just to the words, but the silences in between, you can learn how to read between the lines, and you just may hear. I remind you all that if you have a person in your life suffering from a situation, to give them a thought once in a while. If you notice their silences, patterns, or dispositions have changed, check up on them. If you notice they don't show up like they used to or don't call you, take that as a sign they are in retreat mode and could use a little company, even if they say they are fine, because often they are not. If they are going through an ordeal in their life, pick up a phone and make a point to get together with them or just go visit them. Personally, I will never beg, and neither will many others. Please have compassion for someone in your life going through a difficult time. Most of the time, their silence is not a good thing. Take it from me, from one who knows. Thank you for listening.